You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we welcome in Ross A. Brennan, trial lawyer at Cronauer Law, specifically Texas Cronauer Law, focusing on personal injury and civil rights. How are you, Ross?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on. I like your name. Ross is actually my middle name, so I like your name. But anyway,
yeah, I'm a fan as well.
Yeah. So a little over 2 years ago, on episode 117, we had Nicholas Cronauer, based out of the Chicago area, on our show. So shout out to Nick, doing big things, personal injury, civil rights in the Chicago area. So thanks for coming on. I know you're working with him on some cases, but you're in Texas.
Yeah, that's correct. We're just outside Austin. We previously had an office in Austin, and we're getting ready to move back into Austin here in a couple weeks. But we're always staying in the Central Texas area.
All right, good stuff. So tell us what it's like being from, is it DeKalb? Is that how I say it? DeKalb, Illinois?
It's DeKalb.
DeKalb,
Illinois. That's how they pronounce it.
Illinois.
No,
I butchered that. Tell us what it's from, like being from DeKalb, Illinois.
Well, it's it's 60 miles west of Chicago for folks who may not know, and it's too far out to be considered a suburb, but it's very much in the kind of Chicago orbit. So you're getting all the Chicago news. You're getting a lot of Chicago transplants, a lot of commuters.
Okay.
So it was a good place to grow up. You get used to having four seasons, which living down in Texas now, I don't really have anymore. You're kind of in that just Chicago sphere on stuff, but it was a little more rural. So there was, some agriculture and stuff in the community I grew up in. So it was a pretty good balance. The city's there when you need it. If you want to go in to catch, a Bears game or,
nice.
A sporting event, fine dining, get a museum, whatever, it's all there. But then you were outside the hustle and bustle as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I actually went to Soldier Field for the first time. I saw my Patriots get one of their 4 victories against the Bears this season. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was probably the Bears' worst loss this season, which is why the head coach got fired pretty soon there.
He got fired literally, I think, while I was still well, maybe not while I was still visiting Chicago, but it was like a few days after.
I used to go to a lot of those. My dad had season tickets growing up, so we would that's an example of it's there if you need it, and then you drive back out.
Yep, totally. So tell us about your competitive streak growing up, like what sports you played, like that sort of thing.
Yeah, played a number of different sports growing up. Baseball, football, and actually golf.
Nice.
Golf probably really is what kind of got me really competitive because depending on who you're playing, it's going to be kind of just such a one-on-one type thing, and there's a lot of mind games that you can do in golf that you can't really do with other people. I ended up focusing mostly on baseball because I had the most, I guess, talent you'd say for it. It wasn't exceptional or anything, but it was just enough to keep playing a little bit longer. So, really just enjoyed that growing up, played through high school and a little bit into college.
Okay. That's awesome. What college were you playing at?
A small school, Aurora University in Aurora, Illinois.
That's awesome. Did you have a moment where you knew you wanted to go to law school, or like when did you know you wanted to be an attorney?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question for me because I wouldn't say it was like a lightning bolt moment. It was actually probably after I had an injury my sophomore year of college that stopped me from, working out and playing on the baseball team. Right. So the injury persisted for about 6 months or so. And it was pretty clear that I wasn't going to be playing sports anymore or being particularly athletic, at least for a long time, because it was going to take some recovery. And I just had a lot of time to think about what I wanted to do. And at that point, I had bounced around majors. I think I was on my third major.
Okay.
And I realized, it's junior year now. You really got to kind of figure this out.
Yeah.
You're going to be hanging around a while longer. And my dad, he was an attorney, general practitioner, solo. And so I just kind of decided, well, why not? Let's aim at law school and let's see how it goes. And I haven't really looked back.
Yeah. Wow. And so what would you say your law school experience was like at Valparaiso?
It was a good experience. For those who may not know, that's about 40 miles east of Chicago. So it's in Northwest Indiana, not too far from Notre Dame and South Bend, which most people probably know.
Okay.
I think I felt like it gave me everything I needed, nothing I didn't. I felt well prepared coming out of it. It gave me a really cool opportunity. My 3L year, I was able to clerk for a public defender's office, and it was in Lake County, Indiana. And for those people who may not know, that's the county that's adjacent to Cook County, but on the Indiana side. So it's essentially southeast Chicago. It's it's Gary, it's Hammond, and it's East Chicago. It's very much a major population center. So getting an opportunity to clerk at the public defender's office there for the whole year was really eye-opening for me, and really just kind of cemented, or actually I shouldn't even say cemented, but really just made clear to me that, hey, I want to do this. I want to be in the courtroom. I want to advocate for people. That was a great experience.
Yeah, like I read some of the notes today, and you talk about how you had like this great new sort of feeling, like you really appreciate, or a great appreciation for public defenders and everything, and what they do. Like, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so the way they had it set up, which is actually pretty common. I didn't necessarily know it at the time, but a lot of those attorneys were like contract. So they'd take 20 cases or whatever at any given time. And then they would also maintain a small private practice, typically like a solo practice.
Okay.
But those folks were in the courtroom all the time, and they were doing jury trials all the time.
Wow.
So in terms of just advocacy and someone who could get up there and could just roll with the punches and do every basic thing as well. I mean, they were awesome. And, I had actually previously seen some Cook County public defenders in action as well.
Okay.
Because I'd been in Chicago the summer prior, and, I saw a lot of the same thing too. I mean, they were awesome in the courtroom. Wow. And you could tell, that they were the experienced ones.
Just because they do it so much, like the repetition, and they're doing it so much, you think?
I think so. And I think the people who do those jobs are really passionate about it.
Okay.
I think in my experience, it was very different than kind of what some of the tropes you might see in like a movie or something of like, oh, the overworked, bumbling public defender. I saw the opposite. I saw these public defenders who were doing this job because they loved it.
Right.
And we're dealing with the most serious cases you can imagine, right? I mean, you're talking murder cases, even capital case on down. You're dealing with people who are passionate about this job, and they're doing this work for a reason. So I was really impressed. And I loved that experience. Actually, my primary duty as the law clerk, and the way it worked there is they had one paid law clerk position that they hired every year, and it was a 3L, and it was 20 hours a week, which was the maximum the ABA would allow you to do.
Right.
At the time. Yeah. And your primary job was actually going into the jail and reviewing discovery with the folks who were confined awaiting trial. So, I'd show up each day, I'd look in my bin of, what I had to go through with each client. And, I'd kind of show them everything and then say, okay, well, give us a call, or, do you want me to pass a message to your public defender, and they'll get in touch with you so they could have those conversations. So just getting that experience of going into the jail and interacting, with these folks whose, lives are on the line, right? The stakes couldn't be any higher. It was a really important experience, I guess you'd say, for me in terms of developing as a lawyer.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm curious to know more about the discovery that you were like reviewing with them, but I know it's, we don't have like that much time, but it sounds pretty interesting. Like you have a bin to go through and you're like, hey, was this your jackknife that you made or something? Like, was that like what kind of stuff?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it might be like written statements. A lot of times it was photos. We'd get a disc with photos and be like, hey, like here's the crime scene photos, right?
Okay.
Like, this is what they're going to be presenting at your preliminary hearing. This looks like your apartment from everything we know, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, it was a media like that. If they had given a statement like a confession, sometimes it was like, playing that statement for them and saying, hey, kind of here's what they're going to be relying on, again, either at their preliminary hearing or whatever. What were you thinking when you said this, or what did you understand your rights to be, stuff like that. So just kind of whatever the discovery was, but typically we would deal with some written statements, but then photos and then recorded statements.
Okay, interesting. So tell us about like being on the Air Force and the JAG and like how that all came about.
Yeah. So, after law school, I ended up going almost straight into the Air Force JAG Corps. That was the kind of thing where I'd always kind of thought about joining the military. And actually, I'd always kind of had one of those desires, which I think is pretty common among people who join. Like you always kind of have this burning part of you that's like, yeah, could I do that? It goes back to just kind of being a competitor, I think, of seeing if you have what it takes. And I knew as I was getting older, and I had, kind of continually found reasons not to join, or for whatever reason, it just didn't work out. I knew kind of after law school, it was going to be essentially now or never. So, I decided to go for it. And it's actually kind of strange how I ended up in the Air Force, but, I was looking to go into really any of the JAG corps, right? So I'd gone into the Army, the Marines, or the Air Force. And I was looking at like the application schedule, and the Marines one was actually first.
Yeah.
And I was getting my stuff ready to apply for them, and they had like a deadline. And then I got a call from like the recruiter, a week or two before the deadline, was like, hey, they met their max number this cycle.
Oh, wow.
So don't bother, basically. We'll try to get you in next. I don't remember how often they did it. We'll try to get you in for the next one. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see. There's an Air Force deadline coming up. I'm gonna apply to them too. And sure enough, I ended up getting it.
Okay, wow. So it was like between Marines and Air Force. Is that what you're saying? Like, or is it was it always the Air Force?
No, it was just like, hey, the timing worked out, and that's what the first one that gave me like a yes.
Yeah, wow.
So that's the one I went with.
That's pretty amazing. So, what you said competitive, but like, what really made you do that? Like, was your dad in the military, or like, what was the?
He was not.
Okay.
I wanted something that I was looking for, something a little bit more,
Wow.
And it's kind of hard to explain other than just to say I had always wanted to join the military, and I knew I was getting older and I was going to be running out of chances to do it. And I mean, don't get me wrong, like you go through an officer training, it's not as intense. It's not like what the 18-year-olds go through.
Well, yeah,
right?
that was my question. Like, do you go in directly for JAG, or is it just like you have to do basic training and all that?
Well, every service is different. And the Air Force at that time was appointing you. Basically, you were going in as a JAG, and you were going through an officer training with like chaplains and nurses and doctors and other professions.
Gotcha.
The Marines actually, their process at the time was different, where you would go into kind of the general officer pool, and then if you got through, they would let you be a JAG. But every service is a little bit different.
Gotcha. Did you ever get to yell like "you can't handle the truth" like during that? Anyway, that's crazy.
Only off the record, right?
All right, that was like a ridiculous question. Okay, so do you have any like advice as to why for somebody who might be thinking about going into like the armed forces to go, or the JAG program? Like, do you have any advice to somebody who's thinking about it?
Do it. I've had a great experience. I love my time in the Air Force. The one thing though, go in eyes wide open, is they'll ask you to get in the courtroom. And I really appreciated that when I was applying, they were very straightforward about that. It's like, hey, everyone litigates. Everyone's going to go into the courtroom and start off doing stuff, right? So if you don't want to do trial advocacy, it may not be a great fit for you.
Wow.
Or at least it may be a little bit nerve-wracking your first few years, because eventually you can kind of veer off and do contracts or ethics or other practice areas. But those first few years, they expect you to get in the courtroom, and you're serving as essentially the local prosecutor. So like for me, I wanted to do courtroom stuff, and that goes back to being at the public defender's office, being just really impressed by what those people were doing. It goes back to taking trial advocacy classes in law school. I wanted to do that. And so when I found out and I started talking to recruiters that, hey, they're going to expect you to be in the courtroom from day one, that was music to my ears.
That's awesome. Were the rules of evidence different and all that? Like, was it stuff that you had to learn or not?
No, they follow the federal rules of evidence.
Okay.
There's a few quirks. There's like for classified information and some of the kind of military unique stuff, but 99% of it's the federal rules of evidence.
So, okay. All right. That's pretty good. I don't know why I thought they might have been a little different. Like sometimes they're relaxed in like different courts, but I could definitely see the JAG court being like pretty serious. And like, so were you prosecuting like other Army office, or not Army, but other officers for the Air Force?
Yeah. So you start off as a prosecutor. So my first 4 years, I was a prosecutor.
Okay.
And you're doing other things. You're also kind of serving as the general, what I'd call compliance, or kind of like the general counsel for the base's leadership as well. And you're even doing a little bit of legal aid, what they call legal assistance. If people are getting ready to deploy or go overseas or whatever, and they need a power of attorney or a will or whatever. So you do a few things, but the prosecution function is your primary role. But then after that, once you get enough experience and if you show an aptitude for it, they give you an opportunity to go be a defense counsel if you're interested. So I wanted to stay in the courtroom, so I took that opportunity, and then I went to be a defense lawyer for a little over 3 years.
That's really cool. Okay, I'm sure you make a lot of friends that way, probably. Like being a defense lawyer, I guess. But so real quick before we move on to what you're doing with Cronauer. So tell us about like what the job of an investigator is like. You looked like you were an investigator for a couple of years. Like what was that all about?
So after getting out of the Air Force, before my current job, I spent 2 years doing compliance and employment law investigations. And that was, the first was with a state agency. So like if there would be, an employment discrimination complaint, we would investigate it. And then I also did the same job for a state university, where again, if they would get a complaint from an employee, we would be the people who investigate it. And also in that second role with the university, if it was like within the EEOC process, you would help assist in terms of gathering documents and doing the position statement and things like that, responding to the EEOC and, telling them what happened. Wow. So, that was a cool experience. It was different for me. It gave me, a new appreciation of the federal rules of civil procedure in Title VII and some of the employment discrimination laws that I didn't that I had some exposure to
Right.
previously, but not like when you're living and breathing it every day.
Right.
It was also cool too, because a lot of times as the investigator, you're dealing with a party who's represented by counsel, but you're not talking to them in your counsel role. You're talking to them in your employment role, or I'm sorry, in your investigator role. So at that point, I'd never been in private practice, and it kind of gave me some good examples of like, hey, this is a good way to get what you're looking for. This is a bad way to do it. This is someone who's easy to interact with, and it might help them get a favorable outcome for their client. This is someone who's over defending or over advocating, and it's not helping their client at all. So it was interesting to see that from the not being an attorney in the that perspective.
Right. Okay. So you have a pretty cool story actually about how you met Nick Cronauer, episode 117 here on the Lawyer Stories podcast. So I like the story. You wrote it a little bit. Why don't you tell us about how you guys know each other?
Yeah. So we were law school classmates, and I moved to Indiana to go to law school. And I don't remember I think I arrived there on like a Thursday or something. Classes start Monday. And the next day, what are you going to do, right? What am I going to do the Friday before? I got to get my books. So I go to the bookstore, and I've got the 1L book list. And there's a guy there who I can see has the same book list.
Yep.
And we're both clueless looking for our books.
Yep.
And we strike up a conversation. Hey, who are you? Hey, I'm Ross Brennan. He says, hey, I'm Nick Cronauer. Okay, 1L, yeah. Where are you from? And he says, the same county I grew up in.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, get the hell out of here. Like, I'm from that county, right? Like what? So then we get to talk, and it turns out we grew up about 15 minutes from each other. And our dads were both solo practitioner attorneys in that county. Yeah. And our dads knew each other.
That's awesome.
So anyways, Nick and I clicked right away, and we stayed very good friends throughout law school because we had we have a lot of things in common. We grew up very similarly.
Yeah, I bet. Did your dads have cases against each other or with each other at all?
I don't think they ever had any cases against each other, but they knew each other.
Yeah.
Which was just very surprising to me because he and I hadn't, right? Unbeknownst to us that this all had been kind of going on. But we made fast friends, and we stayed friends, and we ended up being partners in, an advanced trial advocacy class, kind of trial partners, and we just had a lot of the same interests. So that was he was literally the first person I met when I moved to Indiana to go to law school.
Wow. I think that's like an amazing story, like kind of how that happened. So tell us a little bit about Cronauer and like what he's doing there in the Chicago area, and then why the branch in Texas where you are.
Yeah, so Cronauer Law firm's been around since 1979. It was founded by Nick's dad, Chuck Cronauer. After law school, Nick and I graduated the same year. He goes back to our hometown, like that area, and he starts building up the firm with his dad, right? It takes it, it's not a solo practice anymore. They got 2 lawyers, and then they've slowly built it out and really done an incredible job expanding it over these last, 14 years now. And really kind of transformed a practice to where now they do mostly personal injury. They do a lot of medical malpractice, do some workers' comp as well. Mm-hmm. So the firm has been built up over the course of, or over those years. And Nick and I, we stayed friends and stayed in touch while I was in the Air Force. I ended up doing just under 8 years in the Air Force. And then I get out, and I'm doing some compliance investigations. And after about 2 years of that, I'm ready for a change. I'm missing the courtroom.
Right.
And he and I had kind of talked over the years, and he basically threw out the offer of, hey, if you ever want to open up a Texas branch under our umbrella, let me know. The offer's there. And so finally in summer of 2021, I took him up on that and opened up the Texas office of Cronauer Law.
That's amazing. Like, how do you know what to do, right? Like, you're working as an investigator, and like, a case comes in, maybe they're helping you advertise. Like, are you just bouncing ideas off him the whole time and you're just kind of doing things there? Like, how did that work?
Yeah. So I talk to him all the time. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's obviously invaluable to have someone who's been doing it for, again, 14 years, I think now at this point, because that's been basically the crux of his practice for that entire time. Whereas I'm pretty new to personal injury and to civil rights, right? So this is new to me over at least the last 5 years or so. So it helps to have him to bounce ideas off of. And obviously having the infrastructure of a well-established firm is just invaluable, right? It's invaluable. So I'm very grateful for that. At the same time, it's also, it has the feel of being a solo practitioner in a pretty big market down here in Austin. It's pretty competitive and we're kind of in it, right? So, those parts I had to kind of navigate my own way and find my own way in terms of linking up with the local trial lawyers association and stuff like that.
Yep.
So, it's great to be able to bounce ideas off them and have that infrastructure. And then there's the Texas parts I'm kind of on my own for.
So that's awesome. So Ross, you said you missed the courtroom. What did you miss so much about being in there?
It's like real law, right?
Yeah.
I think that's it. It's like real law with a real human being who you're representing. And I don't think that can be replicated.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Lawyers of all different practice areas are very important to their fields. So whether you're doing regulatory or compliance or government work or whatever, it's all super important. For me, though, there was just kind of no replicating that feeling and that sense of purpose you get from being in the courtroom representing a client. And that was something I really, I was first exposed to, again, going back to the Lake County Public Defender. I really felt that when I was doing defense work in the Air Force, and I really missed that during those 2 years where I was outside the courtroom doing those investigations. So that's why the idea of getting back in the courtroom on the plaintiff side was really appealing to me, because I knew I would be there to represent a client again.
Yeah. Wow. So what's your approach to like framing a case? Like, you get a new case, how are you handling it?
I think back to the quote, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Okay.
And that's attributed to Einstein. Maybe he said it, maybe he didn't. But if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And so that's what I really try to approach every case with. This needs to be a simple case. And if I have not simplified it yet, I need to do more work. I need to go take another deposition or issue another subpoena, because if it's complicated, no jury is going to pick up. I mean, our juries are great, but in the modern era, the TikTok era, right? I know that's in flux at the moment, but just the modern era with attention spans what they are, you need to have that simple case going in there, and you can weave in your complicated subjects, because there's always going to be complicated subjects, especially in personal injury where you're dealing with medicine.
Sure.
But first and foremost, you've got to find a way to simplify a case. So that's kind of my North Star when I frame a case, is how can I do this simply? And then from there, just over the course of years, there's all sorts of different techniques that I've picked up, typically from attending classes and stuff like that, different ways to simplify a case.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. When I was in law school, I feel like they were at the point where they were telling us to write simply, like write it simple. They don't want you to use like complex terms and try to confuse people. They want you to be like concise and simple in the way that you're writing.
Mm-hmm.
But so maybe that's kind of similar, but I like that a lot. Like, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. That makes a lot of sense. And
it's not just for juries either, right? It's for judges too, right? I mean, they're overworked. Right. They have a million cases to deal with, and it's no different in a motion argument, right? So you need to be able to hit your point and make it very simply. Hey, here's why this summary judgment should be denied. There's a genuine disputed material fact about whatever. Just pick an element, right? Just find a way to simplify it.
Totally. I like that. So Are you working on any cases, or have you had any recent cases that you want to share about? You certainly don't have to, but is there anything? And if not, you could tell us about your first civilian personal injury case if you want. But is there anything current?
Yeah. So I mean, at any given time, we have a handful of potential exciting cases going.
Yeah.
I would say that I tend to go more towards the federal cases. But, in terms of your question, I'll think back to a case just from a couple of years ago. We had a pretty good verdict, ended up being, I think, 2.4 million. It was reduced down from 4 due to contrib. But that was actually my first personal injury case, right? So this was my first, I had done a bunch of criminal trials, and this was my first civilian personal injury trial. And it was a fatality case. It was a dram shop case. And we ended up, finding a way around the dram shop, because there was, some additional issues that we could bring in a negligence claim, and we're able to get a very good outcome for a mother who had lost her adult child, and it was a tragic case. There were actually 2 fatalities. We represented one of the decedents, and luckily we were able to get a sense of justice for them.
Wow. Well done on that. So what advice would you give to a young personal injury lawyer who's just like hungry, just wants to stay in the courtroom? Do you have any advice for somebody like that?
Be ready to hustle, and I think embrace that. One of the things that I love about the personal injury side, and that I truly do think is unique to personal injury, is we are incentivized to innovate.
Okay.
Being on the contingency fee side, you always are looking for things to do more efficiently, because that's going to give you your best outcome, right? That's going to help you earn more money. And that's one thing that I love, even just having the conversation with clients, is, hey, our interests are aligned here. I'm not going to incur needless expenses, because that takes away from both of our cuts, right? So I think just be prepared to hustle, and then be prepared to innovate, and always think critically about how you can do things better, how you can do things more efficiently. Is there a cheaper way to get this discovery? Is there a free way to get this discovery?
Wow.
Stuff like that. I think that's something I always try to do every time I'm entering discovery on a case. Is I think back to my more recent cases, and I say, okay, well, where did I waste client money last time, right? Where did we incur an expense that I could have avoided, and how do I avoid it the next time?
That's interesting. I like that. So you look critically at the case, and you try to save yourself, the client, some money. Like, if there's possible ways by, using like the precedent, you don't want it to be precedent necessarily. Like if you use money that you didn't need to use on a case prior.
Yeah, and a lot of it's unavoidable, and depositions are unavoidable, right? But you might say, okay, is there an alternative? Is there a court reporter who's willing to, can I save on court reporter fee somehow? Or, instead of getting a copy, can I go to opposing counsel? Can I request it? So just always looking at ways to be more efficient in terms of discovery, and just really the case in general. And that's what I really like, is we're always going to be aligned with the client's interests, or excuse me, with the client, in terms of they make more, we make more.
Right. No, totally. Why do you think clients are coming to Cronauer and you guys like to handle their cases? Is there something that you guys do different, or like what does it take to be, a really good personal injury attorney?
Well, I think, with us at least down here in the Texas office, they're going to get really exceptional customer service. And I think, I hope that they've experienced that, right? So typically you're going to get a direct number to me. I like to be very communicative with my clients. So they're going to get a lot of calls and emails from me. I like to talk to them early and often while a case is going. And I think that that really just helps improve the attorney-client relationship. It helps build trust over the course of years, because civil litigation takes years, which has been an adjustment for me, because criminal cases move much faster, but civil litigation takes a long time.
Right.
But I think really, that's what's drawn some clients is they're going to get, they're going to get a lot of communication, and typically the client's going to appreciate that.
And obviously you're not afraid to go to trial. You have tons of trial experience. You love being in the courtroom. A lot of people just want to settle, but you're prepared if the case goes that way to take it the distance.
Yeah, we definitely we go to trial, or at least I was trying to think actually before coming on the podcast. I'm in a trial over the last 5 years, I think about 1.5 a year.
Yep.
So, it's not, I'm not like one of these, I'm not doing 3 or 4 a year.
Right.
We've had years where we've had 3, I think, but kind of a steady stream of trial. Definitely not afraid to go to trial. I'd love to bring it up a little bit more, but the reality is just with, not a lot of civil cases go to trial, right? With all the different essentially impediments to it, it takes a lot of effort to get a case for trial. And, we certainly are not afraid of that. So that's why we go to, definitely at least 1 to 2 a year.
Oh, that's awesome. So do you think...
that's just me. Our firm's taking more of them to trial.
Yeah, no, for sure. Do you think you guys are going to open any other locations or anything like that in any other states? Are you looking to expand more?
That would maybe be more a question for Nick, but I'd say now, we're we're pretty content down here in Texas. But we'll see. Never know what the future holds.
You're going to keep Austin weird down there. Isn't that the saying down there? Yeah, that's awesome.
That's the saying. You know it. Yeah.
That's great. So is there anything we missed today? Did you want to speak more about your practice or Cronauer Law or anything that we didn't go over?
If you have folks who have been wronged in a personal injury or have a civil rights violation in Central Texas, send them our way. We do travel. We go statewide. So we have cases all over the state of Texas, and it's a big state.
Yeah.
But we are based, we're based in Austin.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Ross, for coming on. And, shout out to Nicholas, Cronauer Law, Chicago, Austin, all over Texas now. We appreciate you. Great story. Thanks again. Everybody tuning in, wherever you are in the world today. Enjoy yourselves. Cheers. Stay right there, Ross.